O.G. Rose, and today we're going to be talking about section 41 of Belonging Again, and we have discussed the ethics against forbidding, Nietzschean children, absolute knowers, character, sociology, and how these things go together. We will need to explore the God question moving forward, but first let's review overlaps and distinctions between character as impossible, the I am in parentheses, in the ethic against forbidding, and character found in Nietzsche, Hegel, and Deleuze. We have explored the possibility of character and how a version of it might still be possible with EAF, though Hunter might disagree, and it's a matter of debate, I think. But we have also pointed out through Hunter that this foundation may be one which defines character in terms of deconstructing givens, which leads to great trouble and ultimately proves self-effacing. However, we have also argued in Belonging Again that once we deconstruct givens, it is nearly impossible to bring them back, which means we must become the children of Nietzsche, absolute knowers, and or Deleuzian. But this runs the risk of us creating our own values and ending up isolated or unintelligible with our own reality tunnels, at which point the social order could prove impossible. Is this fate avoidable? Character for Hegel entails dialectically working through negativity, and if this is not so readily emphasized in Deleuze, perhaps our emphasis should be on Hegel and Nietzsche and Jesus, as we have discussed. And indeed, we have kind of gone through how there may be something in Deleuze that makes there not be much of an emphasis on dialectically working through negativity in favor of, say, intuition or transcendental emergentism, and that will be discussed in the absolute choice particularly. Anyway, it's hard to say, but the point is that Hegel would not accept EAF as popularly and commonly presented, even if Hegel would agree with some of the notions of EAF, as would Nietzsche. We should indeed let people undergo their own development in peace, but it's also not the case that we can dialectically work through negativity if everything is permitted. Not really, no, because in this circumstance there is no social negativity we need to work through. After all, everything is permitted. We cannot say for sure what a person should work through, what a person should hold others responsible for, and what a person should sacrifice his or her will against. Everything is permitted, and so though we might theorize and claim there is a place for working through negativity, that negativity is ambiguous and hard to define. We cannot say for sure what is negativity, let alone what constitutes a negativity we need to dialectically work through. If we take a guess and try to work through that nagging doubt, the nagging doubt that we are suffering for no reason could hinder our ability to persevere, which suggests the way EAF might render negativity ambiguous could hinder our capacity to be absolute knowers. In other words, if it's ambiguous that negativity is indeed something we need to work through, it may not have the same impact on us. So we will have to identify negativity and commit to working through it without social support. But how then will our work translate into social intelligibility? Indeed, it would seem the social order would have to shift to make space for absolute knowing, a point which will require the second part of Belonging Again subtitled address to consider. As EAF overlaps with Hegel but still is an equivalent, the EAF is also the Nietzschean child, is also like Nietzsche's child in that everyone is given space to be themselves and unfold. But while the EAF emphasizes opposition to oppression and developing character through opposing social injustice, Nietzsche believes our values must not be primarily based on externalities we can oppose, which is to say that our values must be more inward and intrinsic. As I presented on in the Thus Spoke Zarathustra Philosophy Portal Conference, which can be found on Philosophy Portal, the website that Cadell last runs. The point of that presentation was to argue that Nietzsche opposes beastocentrism, which is to say Nietzsche doesn't want us to gain our values, inspirations, and motivations from entities external to us, but for us to instead create our values internally through the realization of our own will. Though Nietzsche would not necessarily oppose the goals of EAF, our desire to end oppression, to end depression. He would warn that if opposing these forces is our only source of motivation, then we cannot overcome oppressions without losing our values. We need more. There is no guarantee that working to correct givens will necessarily lead to us creating values for ourselves, which is the crucial step. Opposing givens actually means we might still indirectly derive character from givens, and yet do so in a manner that we don't even benefit from the existential stability which givens can provide. The EAF risks being too negative and not positive enough, which is to say that in EAF we derive value from opposing givens, while in Nietzsche we derive value from creating alternatives to givens. Yes, EAF and Nietzsche can overlap, but the differences matter, and while EAF works to end oppression, Nietzsche's child creates a life alternative to the oppression which shows itself as superior to the world causing the oppression, thus attracting others into it, while also motivating them to create their own values. And indeed, the notion of creating values that attract people as opposed to creating values that we impose upon people is a very important distinction in O.G. Rose. While in EAF, so to continue the thought, Nietzsche's child must also face negativity, which suggests a way Nietzsche and Hegel can be considered together, while in EAF, an experience of negativity can be interpreted as an oppression, which needs to be stopped versus dialectically worked through. In EAF, the emphasis against constraints and restrictions for the full realization of the subject, according to the subject's wants, results in a natural reaction against all feelings of being held back, which is to say the EAF will make it difficult in practice to make clear distinctions between negativity and restriction, meaning the EAF is prone to avoid or try to escape negativity, to erase negativity, whereas Hegel and Nietzsche would have us develop character in suffering it. So, in other words, whenever we feel oppression or restriction, in EAF, it's likely to interpret that as a restriction or oppression, as opposed to where in Nietzsche and Hegel it might be a negativity we need to work through. So there's an uncertainty and ambiguity that can arise that may hinder our ability to work through character as such. Will in Nietzsche is crafted and earned, and this takes work, suffering and negativity, while want in EAF seems more liberated and expressed, and this takes deconstructing the givens and norms which hold want back. Both play a role, and a world without one will prove problematic. It's just that today our troubles seem more on the side of too much EAF than too much will. Please note that mere want in Nietzsche is not necessarily a source of virtue, as isn't mere purpose. To really rise to the occasion of our world today, in which givens are deconstructed, we must do much more, which requires resources not readily available in EAF. Removing restraints and givens will not necessarily make the world a better place. If everything is cleared away and there are no children, the clearing will prove empty. In my view, it does not seem the EAF can create a new CCE, but Nietzsche's child or Hegel's absolute knower seems to be able to oppose the oppressive givens of today, while at the same time creating values which make possible a new CCE. However, there is still the question of shared intelligibility and how absolute knowers can avoid ending up in their own isolated reality tunnel. This is a dire question, and also we must wonder if it is actually possible for people to create their own values and those values have the same authority and power over them as did God in the past. Is this possible, or do we not need to even be worried about something authoritative and grounding like God? To determine that and to elaborate on the sociological function of God in CCE will be highlighted and explored next. For more by O.G. Rose, please visit ogrose.com. Please see the Belonging Again playlist on YouTube, the list on Medium, and thank you so much for your time.